Thank you very much, Claudio. At my age, you lose your hearing anyhow. That just helped to further it along a little bit, that's all. I want to thank all of you for coming back this afternoon after I was here this morning. You know, it's a relatively good sign, even though I see a few seats are empty. So I appreciate your coming back. And hopefully we'll have fun. The topic of my talk this afternoon is totally the opposite of what I talked about this morning. This morning I talked about sales and sales management. And this afternoon, in the brief period of time that you let me speak with you, I'm going to talk about creating and sustaining great customer service. But I'm going to start with a little story and ask you what you might do. It's 12 in the afternoon. You're the manager of the club. You're in there filling in the locker room for your locker room attendant. And up walks to you an 85-year-old man, stark naked, and as wrinkled as the wrinkliest prune you ever saw in your life. And then he comes up to you, stark naked, and hands you a bottle and says, "Would you rub this on me?" And you as the manager would say, "You're crazy." But it's a story from my past that I learned about customer service because it happened to me. I was in the locker room helping out one of the locker room attendants, and this 85-year-old wrinkled old man came up and said, "Would you rub this on me?" And I didn't say to him, but I said to myself, this man has got to be crazy. I didn't go to school for that. I didn't get paid to do that. And then he said to me in just a moment, "Well, Victor does this for me every single day." And I said, "Victor," and Victor being my locker room attendant, I said, "Well, Victor's over there. If I don't do this, Victor will pick on me all day." So I rubbed the lotion on him. And afterwards, I went over to Victor and I said, "Victor, what in the world are you doing rubbing lotion over this 85-year-old guy?" I said, "You know, you might get a reputation." He says, "Steve," he says, "I'm not a locker room attendant. I'm a member service person. I do whatever it takes to make sure the members are happy. And if the members are happy, they spend money. And if they spend money, I know, Steve, you're happy. So I'm just taking care of you, Steve." And so I share that story because what I'm going to talk about today is what do you do to create and, more importantly, sustain great member service. And that's a great example. Another little story. In my youth, going back about 60 years, I worked in a golf club. It was 11 o'clock at night. It was pitch dark out. And I was still working because 8 members had not finished playing golf. That's 11 at night. It's pitch black. And these 8 members come up, and they're all holding flashlights in their golf carts up by the 18th green and putting. And they come in, and I go to them and I say, "Wait a second now, it's 11 nights dark." I said, "Don't you know I've been here since 5:30 this morning working? You're supposed to be off the golf course when the lights go down. I'm not supposed to be waiting here for you to play golf with flashlights." And they didn't say anything. I took their bags. I come in that next day at 7 o'clock in the morning, and there's my boss. My boss never shows up for work before 9 or 10 in the morning. There he is at 7 in the morning. He says, "Steve, come here." He says, "You know, last night about 1 in the morning, 8 people called me on my phone. They woke me up from my beautiful slumber. And they said some knucklehead at the club told them they couldn't play golf with flashlights at night." He says, "You wouldn't happen to know who that is, Steve?" I said, "Yeah, it was me." He said, "They're not supposed to." He said, "Oh, no, you missed it, Steve." He says, "They're members. Members do whatever members want." He said, "For a matter of fact, if those members want to go out in the 18th green with candles and have a seance at 4 in the morning, you need to be there because that is what we do for our members." And I share that story because the point he was trying to make to me is that in the world of clubs, to have incredible membership retention and profitability, you really have to take care of the members. So what I'm going to do today is sort of, is this one working? I'm going to go over a few things. The first is I want to try to help you understand the connection between membership retention and great customer service and great member experiences. And you need to understand that membership retention just simply means the more members we hold on to, the better. But I want to show how you get great retention through service. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. The second thing, I want to talk about this process of creating memorable member experiences through the delivery of great customer service. And I put up that word memorable memory experience, because there's unmemorable experiences members can have. I will guarantee you that. But we're going to talk about creating memorable ones through great service, and that's what I want to focus on. Third is I want to show the importance of service delivery to this whole process of creating memorable experiences. Because that's the business we're really, really in. As much as we like to think we're in the business of helping people lose weight, what we're really in the business of helping people feel better about themselves, enhancing their self-esteem. And that goes back to creating memorable experiences. And the last thing is I'm going to talk about is something that's called the service profit chain. It was developed by a professor out of Harvard University. And I imagine there was probably somebody 5,000 years ago who figured this out, just didn't know how to put it into a book. But this gentleman did. The service profit chain, and also something called service recovery, which is what you do when you mess up, or when a member says you messed up even though you don't think you did. So that's sort of the journey we're going to take. Hopefully, I can do it quick enough that I give you time at the end to ask questions. And if I don't, just sort of raise your hand and wave saying, Steve, cut it off so we can ask questions. So let's talk first about membership retention. And what you're going to notice in these slides, I've put up some pictures from different clubs throughout the world. And they're clubs that do the best job that I know of creating memorable experiences for clubs. This picture up on the wall, you probably look at, looks like graffiti. Matter of fact, that's what it is. It's graffiti. It's from a club in a city called Nizhny Novgorod, Russia. It's a little, tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, Russia. Okay? The average household income in the city is $750 US a month. People don't make a lot of money in the city. Along 1 mile of the main street in that club, on that town, are 6 clubs. All really good clubs. These people opened up a club targeted at people between the ages of 18 and 25 years of age only. They didn't say you couldn't come in if you're older. You could if you thought like an 18 to 25-year-old. And they said their club was targeted toward the urban echo, which echo stands for people under 25. And their whole club, by the way, is decorated in graffiti, in Japanese anime, and everything else. And what they did is they call it an urban fitness disco. To help appeal to these people, the club is a fitness club during the day, and at night it turns into a disco. A Russian disco, which is different than a US disco, by the way. If you've ever heard Russian disco music, it does get the beat up. The day they opened the club, they had 2,000 members between the ages of 18 and 25. And they continue to grow. After 6 months, they're up to 3,000. That's with 6 other clubs on the same block. That's just young people. And as I go through, I'll share some stories of how they went about creating these incredible, memorable experiences that were specific to kids 18 to 25 years old. But you'll see some of the pictures. So what is membership retention? Membership retention, and it's a long word up there, is about creating memorable, magic memories for people through something that's called raving service. Okay? And when you can deliver this raving service, you create what's called member delight. And when members are delighted, members become loyal. And when members become loyal, then they have incredible memories and they stay members. So member retention is really a process of, first and foremost, finding ways to create these magical experiences through raving service that result in having these members that are wowed. And when they're wowed, they become loyal. On my way down here, I was reading USA Today, which is sort of a trashy newspaper in the US. And they had a story in there about the Ford Motor Company, who makes cars and loses money on every car that it makes. And they said if Ford could increase customer loyalty by 1%, they would make $100 million more every year. 1% improvement in customer loyalty, $100 million. Oh my gosh. What would be the first thing I'd do as CEO? I'd be figuring out how to improve customer loyalty. Of course, the people in Detroit do the opposite. They try to make them less loyal because they want to lose money. But that point that I have there is that it really is about creating these loyal people. It's about raving fans. And the best way I can say that is obviously I'm not built like a soccer player. But Argentina plays Brazil, soccer. And I've watched it. There's raving fans on one side, and there's raving fans on the other side. People dress up, they paint, they go crazy. Okay? How many of you have watched a Argentina-Brazil football game? Should be all of you.
Yes.
Yes. Okay? Or I've gone to the UK, and I've watched Chelsea play their competitor. They get so raving there, they knock the fences down and kill people. Okay? They're not quite as civilized as you are down here. The point being is, fanatic as they are, they're loyal. And they spend money. They spend money to go to the game, they spend money on the beer during the game, they spend money, they spend money, they spend money. They're raving fans, and they have great memories about it. Because then if you go to the pub later in Ireland, they talk about it. And they talk about it till they can't even walk out. The concept being is that memory retention for us is about creating these fanatical, raving service that makes memorable moments. The other point that I really want to make, and I apologize, I'm not sure I quote it right, this computer's having problems, is simply the fact that, forgive me, this computer, I'm going to ignore my computer and I'm going to go by what's up here, is the simple fact that memory retention is about creating an environment that's conducive to delivering great service. It's about creating an environment that creates memories. And you want to be in the membership retention business. And so that's sort of what we're going to do about it. So I'm going to now talk about what is an experience, because you heard me say this word experience. What's he mean by experience? First thing to know about experience is it's memorable. It sticks out in your mind. It's an emotional thing. Okay? I have 2 children. And I remember when they were 5 years old and 8 years old, I took them to Disneyland. Okay? And we spent 3 days at Disneyland. And of course, my son liked Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and all that. He went crazy. My daughter went crazy. They had an incredible experience. But my experience was better because I got to experience what my kids were feeling. And to this day, I still talk about taking my kids to Disneyland. And I've done it 3 times. I went back 3 times. I spent way too much money on Walt Disney, and he made lots of money off it because of the incredible memories. I still have pictures in my house of it. It's an incredible memory. That's what I'm really talking about. That's what experience is, a memory. Okay? You want your customers, I like to call them members, to have memories. There's a club in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's called the Premier Athletic Club. And one of their members was being interviewed on the TV by a newscaster. And the newscaster asked, well, what do you like about this club? And he said, it's been the center of my life. I met my wife here. I got married, I was a member here. When my kids were born, I was a member here. I've had 6 jobs, but this club has always been here for me, to support. That club created memories for that member. That member was a member for life. You want members for life. You don't want them to pay you for a life membership. You want them as a member for life. That's what I mean. The second thing about an experience is it's an emotional buy-in. Okay? And there's a big difference between an emotional and a non-emotional purchase. Okay? If I go to the store, now I apologize, women, if I offend you here. It may be an emotional experience for a woman to go shopping. For a man, it is far from being an emotional experience. If anything, sometimes it's a fearful experience. Okay? But it's not. But you want the experience that your members to have to be incredibly emotional. Okay? You want them to just tie into it, because emotion has no price tag. Emotion has no price tag. And so if you can deliver those memorable experiences, there is no price tag that you put on your business. I'll give you an example. There's a club in Houston, Texas. It's called the Houstonian. Appropriate name. The Houstonian charges its members $30,000 to join. You put it up and you never get it back. Then once you paid them $30,000, you get the great pleasure of paying them another $350 a month every month you're there. And then if you happen to take personal training, you have the pleasure of spending $125 an hour for a personal trainer. And oh, by the way, if you want to store your stuff in a locker, you can pay another $100 a month to rent the locker. Their membership retention rate is 97%. 97%. People spend all that money, and then they don't leave, they keep staying and they spend more. Why? Because the Houstonian creates memorable member experiences. And so that's what I'm talking about. You have to create this incredible fascination for your club. Okay? And it's also an experience that's very personal. My experience at Disneyland is different than my kids' experience. Walt Disney wants to create a generic experience, but their experience and my experience are two different things. So one thing I'm going to tell you, an experience is always highly personal. It's very, very highly personal. And so we're going to talk about a service delivery process that allows you to do that. And I will apologize if I have to refer to a note so I don't refer a story, since as my son does computer animation. He makes video games. You may have heard some of his video games. They're very famous. Blood Rain 1, Blood Rain 2. Those sound familiar? How about Ghostbusters? He's the lead animator for Ghostbusters. He tells me I'm technologically impaired. He says when I come close to a computer or a video game, it's bound not to work. So that's what's just happened here, okay? But the other thing about experiences is that it's about blending your product. Your product is your facility, it's your equipment, it's your programs, and creating something unique. And I'm going to share a story that maybe exemplifies what I mean about that. There's a club in this part of the world called EcoFit in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It's one club. Very successful club, competes against some incredible clubs, whether it's Biorhytmo, Companhia Atlética, SA Runner, Forfeit. But what they did is they created a theme. And their theme was to connect members to members, but more importantly, connect members to nature. And the club is what's called 100% green. They used reclaimed rainwater for the swimming pool, for the showers. All the products used in the club are natural recycled materials, right down to the paper, right down to the uniforms that people wear. On top of that, they created what were called ecological neighborhoods throughout the club. So if you participate in group exercise, there's a neighborhood outside of group exercise where you can connect in a natural environment with those fellow group exercise people. Then, if you go to the weight room, there's a separate little neighborhood outside the weight room. And in the swimming pool, there's another separate little neighborhood, and it's all green and ecological. They created this theme. They have all the recyclable things throughout the club. If you are carrying a piece of paper or a piece of glass, you have no choice but to put in a recyclable container. They run programs every week to connect people to nature. What they've done is they've themed and created this incredible opportunity for people who have a real interest in the environment to be a member of their club. They're nothing about fitness. But by the way, the 2,700 members there do get in shape, but they're not there because of fitness. They're there because of the experience. And it's very personal. And there's a difference between that and what service is. Service is a delivery process. And service is how you deliver something. It's the attitude that you and your staff have about how you're going to take your product and stage some type of experience that is unique and personal to everybody there. So it's a delivery process. It's an attitude. It's an attitude people have. Secondly, it's not just about an attitude, it's a process. You have to have a formalized process in how you're going to deliver service. Okay? I flew down here on an airline, American Airlines, who has a reputation for miserable service. Okay? They are not a good airline to fly. I hope nobody here works for American. Okay? If you go with a problem to American Airlines, they go, so what? Okay? They don't have a good attitude. Service is an attitude. It's also a process. Okay? And it's a process that's about delivering what you have by staging experiences that helps you to do that. And I just wanted you to know there is a difference between an experience and between service. People say, we want to be great at service. Why do you want to be great at service? Because you want to create experiences. But you have to understand that the service is only a delivery method. It is not an outcome. An experience is an outcome. For a matter of fact, when I'm finished today, some of you will have had a great experience. I hope. Some will have had a good experience. Some will have probably had a bad experience. Okay? If I was a club operator, I don't want you to have a bad experience. I want you to have a good one. I have to find out something about you to make sure that I can do that. So what I want you to do, where I'm going to start now, is I want you to understand how a customer responds to your service delivery. Because you have to understand that in order to deliver the right type of experiences. And I want you to know that there's 4 ways people can respond to your service delivery. The first one's up here, and I use a picture, courtesy of my son. This is what we call outrage. Okay? It's one of the responses. It's an emotional response. It's emotional dissatisfaction. People are upset, angered, they just go nuts. I like to call them business terrorists. Okay? They're an Al-Qaeda to your business. They will destroy it faster than anything else. And you have lots of outrage. I'll give you a great example. I managed a club in New York City called the Atrium Club. And we had 8 treadmills. Unfortunately, this is back in the 80s, we also had 2,500 members. So there were times when treadmills got a little bit crowded. And people wanted treadmills when somebody was on it. And some New Yorkers, when they want something, they take it. And I had this one young lady, her name was Sari Frey. And she would go up to whoever was on the treadmill, and she'd always pick on a woman since she was a woman, someone on her own side, and she grabbed their hair while they're on the treadmill, and she'd yank them off. That is outrage, both on her behalf as well as the person who just got yanked off the treadmill. And yours truly always had to deal with that outrage. And unfortunately, I didn't handle it too well, and as a result, I had her do that a few times before I had to kick her out of the club. So you don't want people at outrage, because Sari then would go out and she'd talk to all the members on the floor. You know, they don't ever think of us, they don't provide enough treadmills, they don't care. She became a business terrorist. She became the last person I wanted in the club. I had to remove her because she was hurting our club, not to mention the members. That's some outrage. And that happens all the time in business. Do you know to identify when you have outrage? Because you don't want that outcome. Do your employees know what it is? The second response somebody can have is dissatisfaction. Not be happy with the service that you give. Not happy with the experience they have. It's not emotional. I'd like to say it's like, okay, I didn't enjoy it. I don't really want to put up with it. I don't have another choice now, but something better comes along, I'm going to go for it. That's dissatisfaction. That happens a lot in the club business. You ran out of towels in the locker room, someone's dissatisfied. You know, they couldn't get on the treadmill when they wanted, they're dissatisfied. They needed some help on a weight workout, and nobody was there to help them. They came into the club for the 40th time, and the person at the front desk still didn't call them by their first name. They're dissatisfied. If you dissatisfy a customer a few times, they become outraged. This will make sense as we go through it. The third response someone can have is what's called satisfaction. And you'll read books and you'll hear speakers talk about our goal is 100% customer satisfaction. How many have ever heard somebody say we want 100% customer satisfaction? How many? Just raise a hand have ever heard that term. I see some hands. If you achieve 100% customer satisfaction, you're going to go out of business. The satisfaction is not emotional. You met a person's need. You fulfilled an expectation. But nothing grabbed me. Nothing really just grabbed me and held on to me. Chances are when something better comes along, something a little less expensive, I'm going to go. I don't think here in Buenos Aires you've experienced price wars yet, like we have in the United States with clubs. Price wars happen because our customers are either satisfied or dissatisfied, and the minute something cheaper comes along, they leave. Satisfied people won't hang around for you. They'll leave when something better or cheaper comes back. Your goal is to get them to the last point, which is to get them delighted, to wow them, to make them a raving fan. This is where you get emotional buy-in. You create what I call business apostles. Think about it. If you think about who the apostles were, 12 apostles, and there's 2 billion Christians in the world, and 12 apostles started it all. It went from 12 to 2 billion. If you're religious, you understand what I'm saying, is that simply a business apostle is someone that is fanatically delighted with whatever the experience is that they've had at your club. There's a club in San Jose, California, and they have a committee. It's called a membership committee in their club. It consists of 12 members. Those 12 members bring in 90% of the club's members. Those 12 members on that membership committee bring in 90% of the club's members. It's called the Silicon Valley Capital Club. 90% of my new members come from 12 existing members. Those are these members with a big smile at the bottom that are delighted. They're wowed. Okay? They're passionate. And there's companies out there that create that type of energy. What I want you to understand is those emotions. In the business in the US and in some places in the UK and in Germany, clubs make a habit of every quarter doing surveys to measure the overall sense of experience of their members, to know where they fall. Because you as a manager, you as a leader are going to have a hard time. You're going to see the one-off person who has outrage or the one-off who's satisfied. But you may not see all this. But when you do surveys, you can. So what I'm going to tell you, this whole concept of creating and sustaining great member service is simply nothing more than trying to get people to delight, to get that emotional response. Just like they said, if Ford improved customer loyalty 1%, they'd make $100 million. In a club, if you could improve member loyalty by 1%, some of you could make $100,000 or $200,000 a year more. And I doubt there's an investor owner that wouldn't want to make $100,000 or $200,000 more. If there are some that wouldn't want to do that, I'm not sure why they're in business. But that's what I want to get you to. So I've got a graph up here to make a point about how important it is to get to member delight. And the reason I want to emphasize this all to you is that when I'm talking about great service, there's only one reason to deliver great service. It's to get to this point, to get delighted members. This was a study done over a 3-year period. We went out and surveyed 100,000 members at Club Corp. And we rated their experiences. We asked them to rate their experience, whether they were dissatisfied, satisfied, or delighted with their experience at the club. We didn't ask if they were outraged, because if they were, they weren't there anymore. So we didn't have to ask that question. They were already history. And then we asked them some additional questions. We asked everybody, how likely are you to remain a member? Okay? Or how likely are you to leave? Okay? Or are you considering staying? And one of the things we found out, and I'm colorblind, so my color is not good, but this right here represents delighted. This represents satisfied. We found that when that question was asked, a delighted member was twice as likely to stay a member as somebody who was satisfied. A delighted member was twice as likely to say they were going to stay as someone who was satisfied. They were more than 10 times likely than someone who was dissatisfied. There's a lot of value in that. I would much prefer someone that's up around 90% likely to stay than someone that's under 50%. That's the difference between satisfied and delighted. That's a big impact. If you look at the other end, how likely are you to leave? Delighted people never will leave. Satisfied people leave almost as much as dissatisfied people say they're going to leave. That's pretty incredible. If you satisfy someone or you dissatisfy them, they're almost equally likely to leave your club. So what good does it do to create a satisfied customer? It doesn't do much good at all. Maybe more importantly in our business, since I talked about sales this morning, was this graph. How's everybody doing? It's after lunch. In exercise physiology, we call this the period of postprandial lapse, i.e. your stomach gets full, the sugar goes, drops from the brain, and the head gets a little dozy. That's why Guillermo stuck me here after lunch. He figured if you fell asleep, it was just me. So, this is even more important. Those same people we asked here, How likely are you to refer somebody else from membership? If you had a delighted member, they were 9 times as likely as a satisfied person to refer somebody from membership. 9 times more likely. They will. 9 times more likely to bring somebody else into the club. If I'm a salesperson, if I'm a manager, I'm saying, this is great, my members are selling the club for me, I'm not having to sell it. So if you create a delighted customer, it's 9 times more. And forget dissatisfied. Now this other one is they will consider it. They may consider it. You'll notice that delighted people don't consider it, they will. It's not even a thought for them. They know they're going to refer someone. But look at how close satisfied and dissatisfied are. There's very little difference in how a satisfied customer and a dissatisfied customer respond. They're almost equal. Nowhere near what a delighted customer is. And so that's the point I really want to create. That's the value in doing that. Maybe some other points just to hit it home is that when you can have even a 1 or 2% improvement or a 5% improvement in your member loyalty, you can generate from anywhere from 25% to 100% more profitability. It's just like Ford. Just that slight improvement in member or customer loyalty. And what's interesting, you don't have to have 100% of your members loyal or delighted. The research shows in business, if you can get 20% of your customers to be delighted, you will always be very profitable. 20% delighted, 80% satisfied. I'd always like to be the other way, 80 delighted, 20. But just knowing that all I have to do is get 20%. What was interesting in Club Corp, we never got above 14%. And we strived really hard. But what was interesting, when our delight scores went up, our retention scores went way up. We had 225 clubs, and our average retention rate across all clubs was about 85%. We had clubs in the 90s. So as we focused on that. So that's a point I wanted to make. A link that we're going to talk about a little bit later is that this link is the higher the satisfaction score, the more delighted my customers are, also means the more excited and delighted my employees are. We're going to talk about the service profit chain, which is this connection between my employees and my members, which, by the way, happens to be the most important link in great service. Happens to be that link between the employees and members. So I just wanted to share that. Okay? The point being that I'm hopefully getting across is that when we talk about creating and sustaining great service, all I'm really trying to get to the point is that our whole job in life, in this business, is about having delighted customers. Okay? What do we have to do to get them to delight? And that's through this incredible service experience, raving service, and creating memories. Okay? So I am now going to move on. Does anybody have any specific questions, or would you prefer to wait to the end? We're going to talk about the service profit chain, because I just talked about employees. The service profit chain is going to be your key. Because anything that you take away from this, hopefully, besides the importance of delight, will be a service profit chain. It starts with our employees. And it starts with the point that I want to make sure you understand is that it's all about the quality of internal service. It's what type of service do you deliver to your employees? If you deliver great service to your employees, you get satisfied employees. If you do a phenomenal job of delivering service to your employees, then you have delighted employees. And the research has shown if you have satisfied and delighted employees, you retain them more. They're more likely to stay, more likely to have tenure. And if they stay and they have great tenure, they're going to be an awful lot more productive. There's a club in Lafayette, Louisiana, city of about 100,000 people. The club is called Reds. Reds opened in 1963. 100 meters was how big his club was when he opened. Today, in 2008, 45 years later, that 100-meter club is now 10,000 meters. What was once 100 members is now 20,000 members. 20,000 members in a city of 100,000 in one club. What's more interesting is that he has 20% of the city as a member of his club. And there's 21 other clubs in his city. how does red get 1 out of every 5 citizens in Lafayette to be a member of his club when he's got 20 other clubs, 21 other clubs fighting him? How did he get from 100 meters to 10,000 meters? Red understood the first purpose of service profit chain. Red says his first priority is to knock the socks off his employees, because he wants employees for life. He says, if I have employees for life, they're going to be so incredibly productive, they're going to know every member, every citizen, and I'm going to be successful. The average tenure of a department head in Red's club is 20 years. The average tenure of every employee is 15 years. His employees know everybody. Are members going to leave? People don't leave. I shouldn't say that. Divorce rates are high. Most people don't leave a relationship. That's the concept behind the service profit chain. You have tenured employees. In our company, our chairman, when I used to work for the big company, Club Corp, Robert Dedman would start every morning off on a meeting and say, okay, everybody who's been with the company 1 year, raise your hand. And he'd keep doing it. 20 years, 30 years. And then at the end he said, do you realize that we have 10,000 years or 15,000 years of experience in this room? How can we not be great? His point was tenure is critical. If you want to deliver great service, you have to have tenured people who are good or great. In order to do that, you've got to do the first part of the service profit chain. And what that service profit chain says, if your employees are productive, then they can deliver great service to the customer. And only then can they deliver great service to their customer. And if they can deliver great service, they're going to have satisfied customers. What they forgot to say is that if you have these productive employees, you're going to have more than satisfaction. You're going to have delighted customers. And when you get delighted customers, they're, as it says here, delighted, you then end up with loyal customers. In our case, loyal members. And when you have loyal members, you make more money. They spend more money. You're more profitable. And so if I were to summarize what this service profit chain really means is that, remember, creating, sustaining great member service starts with creating and sustaining great employee service for your employees. If you can do that and instill that, then you can get to the next stage, which is be able to do that with a customer and get to delight, create the experiences. Okay, what I'm going to talk about now, go back a little bit. So we've talked about this service profit chain. Hopefully you understand 2 big things now. That your goal is to create member delight. You do that through memorable experiences. You do that through delivering great service. You do that through your employees. There's 2 thoughts here into how you do this. One is called an expectations path. The other is called a needs path. And I'm just going to briefly touch on, in my own language, what that expectations path is. An expectations path is a journey that some people take. Okay? And the first thing the expectations path says is that I have to treat my member, my customers, having a certain set of expectations. Okay? They have, maybe those expectations are to lose weight. Maybe those expectations are to meet somebody. There's a club company based in the U.S. called Equinox. Equinox delivers great service to a degree through this expectations path of creating experience. They have created a profile for their customer, a profile. They know that their customer is between 25 and 40. They know their customer likes to be seen and be heard. They know their customer is into the edgy, into the sexy. They appeal to that. They have a profile of who their customer is. So if you're going to follow this expectations path, you have to understand what are the expectations of your audience. You have to create a profile for it. Who are they? Do you know who exactly your customer base is, your member base? What is it? I asked that when I went on a tour the other day to some of the clubs here. I asked them, what's the profile of your membership? Some could tell me, some couldn't tell me. But you'd have to do that. The second thing is then is you've got to find out what those expectations are. If you're going to do that, you have to do 2 things. First is you're going to have to treat every customer the same. That's a profile. You have to treat them as a profile. But you got to understand what that profile is. What is that profile that they have? That's the second thing that you're going to have to do. Okay? And then the third thing you're going to have to do is to find a way to exceed those expectations, to somehow surprise people, to go beyond those expectations. Okay? That's a needs path. Share a story. It's 1993. It's in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's 5:30 in the morning. 50 bank executives, CEOs walk into the club in their gym shorts and their t-shirts. And they head to this gymnasium. In the U.S., here it's probably called a sport court, basketball court. They all walk down there. They walk into the room. They're going to take boot camp class. But they have a hard time seeing because it's very smoky and foggy in the room. And you start to hear some music. All of a sudden, a rope comes down from the ceiling. And all of a sudden, after the rope, comes a guy rappelling down the rope in full camouflage gear. And they start swearing at him, making him do push-ups and running around. For the next 90 minutes, these 50 executives who pay $50 to participate in the class are as happy as they could ever be. That is an instructor who understood the expectations of his audience. He themed an experience. He put the smoke machines in the room. He had the rope come down from the ceiling. He got in full camouflage. And he would do that, but he would do other. He had a Superman class. He would decorate the studio like Gotham, or what was the city? Metropolis. And he'd dress up like Superman, and he'd come down from the ceiling. He would do a Batman class. He would do a Spider-Man class. He would theme all his classes. He's the most successful instructor I ever saw in my life. And it was nothing because he understood the expectations of his audience. And what did he do? He surprised them. There's boot camps all over the world right now. Everybody runs a boot camp. And they have people jump over things, walk under things, go over things. And the instructor is dressed in their Nike or the Adidas or their Puma gear, and they look real good and muscular like this. Don didn't believe that. He says, if I'm going to do a boot camp, it's going to be a boot camp. I'm going to put the boots on, the camouflage. I'm going to come out of the sky. He might have carried a fake pistol with him. He made it real. He exceeded. He surprised. If you are going to try to create that incredible service, those incredible, memorable moments, you got a stage experience. You can follow that path, expectations path. But you better know the profile of your customer, and you better uncover what it is, and then you better go way beyond to exceed that expectation. You need to find a way to surprise the heck out of them. Do you do that? Surprise them for a good way, not a bad way, by the way. Now there's this other path, which is called the needs path. It's a little bit different. Some people like to follow this. The Houstonian follows this one. This one's very, very personal. Okay? And it requires a couple things. I'll put them up here. First is, it's all about understanding what safety is. Every consumer, every member has a definition for safety. Now, safety isn't a physical safety. It could be a mental, a psychological, and emotional safety. The club in New York, athletic and swim club, the people there, their definition of safety is a non-intimidating, relaxed environment. Why? Because in New York City, you're fighting with 8 million other people for a little space on the sidewalk when you walk to work. They wanted it non. That was safety to them. I go to Russia and I go to world class. They have a bodyguard at the entry to every one of their clubs. And you're going, you've got to be kidding. Why a bodyguard? Because to the members in Russia, who are all quite affluent, by the way, they fear that someone is going to kidnap them and take money from them. The fact that there's a bodyguard there that really probably can't protect them all coming in, but the fact that they're there provides security and safety. Okay? What is safety and security to your members? Is it emotional? Is it psychological? Is it physical? Okay? And what is it to each individual? You've got to find that. There's a company called Curves in the U.S. Curves is successful because they understand that. They understand that women over the age of 40 and they're a little bit heavy want a non-intimidating environment that doesn't have men around. And doesn't have women around who look like they should be in the cover of Cosmo. That's safety. Okay? They also, the other word you'll see up there is justice. Justice is about being treated equally and fairly. And for each person, that's a little bit different. I'm going to give you some examples in a moment when I put them up on the board, and I'll probably have to pull out my sheet so I say them right. But the point being is that I fly. I'm an American Airlines client, SAM United and others. And I'm what's called a platinum member. I've never been able to get to executive platinum because I just refuse to fly that many miles. I expect to be treated like every other platinum member. To me, that's justice. I'd be treated fairly. I don't want to have to sit in this seat when this person gets this benefit. That's not justice. So in the club business, what is justice to your members? Do you have policies and rules in your clubs? Your members understand how you are going to treat them. That's a form of justice. You have to sit. If unfortunately in 70 minutes, I don't have time to go into all the details, but I just want to. This third thing is important. It's self-esteem. If you follow a need path, self-esteem is the most important need of any individual in the world. Okay? What is going to bring self-esteem to your client? I got into the fitness business because of self-esteem. I started working out. When I was in 5th grade, I was 5'6" and about 210 pounds. I was a butterball. I was also a nerd and a butterball. Okay? And nerds and butterballs get picked on by the other kids. And I didn't like that. My mom even picked on me. So I said, how do I do that? So I started working out, and I joined the Y, and I worked out, and I worked out. And I found I got a little bit skinnier, I got a little bit stronger. I still stayed nerdy, but less people picked on me. I still got in better shape. And then one time in 6th grade, a kid that had always been beating me up took a swing, he missed, I hit him and knocked him out, and my self-esteem went, wow. And what I realized is that fitness made me feel better about me as a self. For everybody, there's something that exercise, fitness, in your club can make them feel better. Whether it's they look better, they feel better, they lose weight, maybe they gain weight. There's people who like to gain weight, okay? You got to find out what it is. So what I'm saying in these paths is you have to identify for not the customers in general, but for each individual. What makes them secure? What makes them safe? What do they feel is justice? What is treating them fairly? Okay? And then what can you do to create self-esteem and enhance it? And lastly, how do you stage an experience? How do you create a stage? How do you make your club, just like theater, where you have a stage? I'm going to give a story that I think is a great example of this. When I first started working in New York at this club, the Atrium Club, it was located on the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th floor of the club. And on the top of the club was a little sun deck. Now in New York City, sun is a very, very valuable commodity. It doesn't come out very often. And when it does come out, there's very few places you could lie down and catch any rays without getting stabbed, shot, or beat up. So this roof was very important. And I joined, and the boys started telling me the stories. You know, last week so-and-so threw someone's clothes off the sun deck. The other day someone pulled someone off their chair and kicked them. I'm going, you've got to be kidding, that just doesn't happen. So I observed the first weekend. I couldn't believe it. People were punching each other, pulling their... I'm serious. These are people with an average household income of $1 million a year. They're pulling each other's hair, hitting each other, throwing my lifeguard in the swimming pool, doing all this fun stuff because they couldn't have a chair. Now, what the existing staff that was there forgot to do is understand what is safety, justice, and self-esteem to the members of this club. So I talked to the members, and I talked to them and I listened to them, and they said to me, you know, says the problem is we want the sun. We want a chair. If we have a chair and we get up from the chair to go to the restroom, get a drink of water, we don't want to come back and find somebody else took our chair. And so my brain goes ding, ding, ding. I got it. You can reserve a chair. So I started a reservation policy. And we had less fights. We still had more. And a member said to me, Steve, why don't you charge for those chairs on the Sunday? Ding, 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 ding. So then it was, you can reserve a chair for a 2-hour time slot at $10 an hour. Now I'm talking about a cheap plastic chair on a small sun deck for $10 an hour. You can reserve it for 2 hours, 7 days in advance. Chairs were booked for the entire summer. I never had a fight again. Now nobody else would have thought, let's charge a lot of money and have reservations for sun chairs. It's sort of like people who do reservations for spinning bikes when they're packed. The point being is that I understood for these people, justice was they all wanted to have the opportunity to have a chair. Safety for them meant having a chair and nobody stealing it from them. And they were willing to pay the price to do that. I staged an experience. It got to be, I made so much money, I used to have a waiter go up there and serve water to people because I could afford to do that. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that whichever path you happen to take doesn't matter. But understand, if you're going to take the expectations path, you're not looking at people as an individual, you're looking at them as a profile. And you're trying to present yourself, your service and experience to exceed that. Okay? Whereas in the needs path, you're really looking at these elements. Okay? So what I have up here, I'm going to put up here, and unfortunately, I don't know everything that's up there. I haven't memorized my talk, by the way. Okay? And unfortunately, I can't read Spanish. If it was in German, I might have a chance. But what this is talking about here is what's required to take place if you're going to follow that needs path. And it first says, basically up there in summary, is that you got to find out what the expectations of your audience are. And who do you want that audience to be? What are their expectations? What are you going to do to uncover that? Right? And how do you do that? Do you do focus groups? Do you do surveys? Do you have every member when they join a club fill out a profile so you begin to get a profile of who your members are? So then you begin to understand those expectations. That's what you have to do. You know, you've got to ask all those questions. And then what this is saying is once you've done all that, you really have to create the products and services that are going to exceed those expectations. That's all this is saying. This whole slide is basically saying that. I want to know the profile of my customer. I want to find out what that is. Okay? When I find out, I'm going to package the program, the service, the equipment, everything I do to meet and exceed those expectations. And then I've got to find a way to deliver on that. Do you have a question? I just need to put a headset on for it. Is there a headset for... I apologize. I don't think they were afraid maybe to put a headset on. Where is it? I apologize. I'm waiting. I know they were supposed to have one up here. Can we wait to the end for your question? And that way they'll give them time to find it. And I apologize. They said they had one up here, but I can't find it. So we will wait to the end. Okay? Because I think that I got about 15 minutes, so this should work fine. But that's all this one is saying, is that you really have to really build your profile. Company that does it really well, Equinox in New York, does this really well. They know the profile. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. So I will put this on. You can ask the question, the young man over here.
Hola, ¿me escucha ahí? Hay una ley de
I can't hear. We're having problems here, technology. It's me, don't worry. Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead with the question now. Now I can hear.
Yo tengo una información respecto al tema de cuando se trata de conocer las expectativas del cliente. Una regla de oro que lo leí en algún libro, que dice que tienes que tener el dinero necesario para lo que vayas a preguntar, porque de lo contrario el cliente es indagado sobre sus expectativas y por razones económicas la institución no está al alcance de cumplirlas, y eso genera decepción. Entonces, ¿cómo?
Okay, I will do my best to answer that question. First is to find out people's expectations. I will never ask them what is their expectation. I will ask for a profile, so I will ask them indirect questions. Best time to do it is when you have a prospect come into the club. You have a form that they can fill out. It may ask them if they exercised before. It may ask them, how they feel about this, or how they feel, what are their hobbies, what they're interested in. You ask a series of questions, and you can create, especially once you put in a computer profile. So it's not expensive to do. Every time you do a survey of your members, if you do an annual survey, you can ask certain questions in that. And over time, you build a database of information about who your customer is and an idea of what their expectations are. One of the things is that we ask in a profile, we ask them where they buy their shoes. We ask them where they buy their clothes. We ask them where they go for sporting events, what movies they see, what music they listen to. We ask them questions like that because we begin to get a profile of who they are. You know, we ask them, do they drink wine? What type of wines? We begin to build a profile of who they are, and that's cheap to do. You just have to ask the questions. You get that information, it gives you a feel for who they are. Okay? Then you'll understand what their expectations are. If you were to ask me questions, okay, I'm 55. I'm a grandpa. Okay? Ask me what my hobbies are. Okay? One of my hobbies is I teach mixed martial arts. You look at me and say, what? Okay. I'm a 5th degree black belt in karate. I'm a master in Muay Thai and Burmese fighting. I'm a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So what's my hobby? I like to fight 20-year-olds in the ring. Now, you sort of get an expectation for it, and you look at me and say, well, he looks fat, he looks overweight. 55, he limps because someone hurt my knee in a match the other day. You'd wonder why. But if you don't ask me, you won't know. If you ask me where I buy my shoes, I'd say Foot Saver. I don't like to spend money on shoes. Okay? I guess the point is you got to ask the questions, and you have to do it when the prospect comes in. You have to find the opportune moments. You also have employees that can find that information out for you. Billy in the locker room at the Atrium Club in New York knew more about members than I ever knew because he was there. He gave me an example. He was telling me a story. One of the members of my club was Bruce Springsteen. Anybody know who Bruce Springsteen is? The boss? Anybody know who Billy Joel is? See? Whoa. Billy Joel. Okay? Somebody like somebody like. They're both members of my club, the Atrium Club in New York. Anybody ever hear of a guy named Joe Namath? He's a quarterback. He's the other football that you do with your hands instead of with your feet. Okay? They're all members of my clubs. Well, what Billy knew about Bruce Springsteen is Bruce Springsteen worked out 3 hours a day, 6 days a week in our club. He's a fanatic. But Bruce Springsteen liked to have, he wore cowboy boots to the club all the time. And he liked his cowboy boots polished a certain way and left in a certain place. Okay? Billy knew exactly what that was. And so Bruce Springsteen constantly was surprised at the fact that he'd go work out when he came back, his boots were polished and in a certain place. Okay? Your employees can gather that information and they can enter it for you. You can have a system, especially with technology, that if I find something out, I put it in the computer. So now it's in there. That's what they do. Another great story, and I hope I'm a storyteller. As you can obviously tell. I was in Beijing, China. I opened up the very first club for our company in Beijing. Opened it in 1994. As a matter of fact, it was the first freestanding sports club in Beijing. Back then, they didn't have all the automobiles there. There was a lot of little bikes. You rode bikes everywhere. So anyhow, I was taking a member, new prospective member to the club, his coat. I noticed that he had a button that was missing from his coat. And he noticed, we didn't say anything. We left at the reception desk. When we left an hour and a half later, the button was on the coat, sewed on. The receptionist had noticed it and went out, got a button, and sewed it on. Did that exceed his expectation? We're walking, all of a sudden he says, wait a second, I couldn't button my coat before, now I can. Did we blow him away for a simple little cheap button? Absolutely. So the point is it's not an expensive questionnaire process. It's a simple process of collecting data, using your employees to do it, and then what I said here is going way above and surprising the heck out of people. That's what they did with a button. They surprised them. Okay? That's what Don Evans did when he came out of the roof in his camouflage. He shocked them. That's what you got to do. Okay? So that's the needs path. And I'm probably going to go a little bit fast here so I can get through some other things. Also, if any of you want this PowerPoint, I'm going to guess Guillermo has copies of it. I have it in English, so I'd be glad to email it to you, but I don't have it in Spanish. But I know my dear friend Guillermo does have it in Spanish. So if you twist his arm on the way out so that I don't have to read all this to you, I won't. But this is talking about that needs path, which means you have to understand what safety means to everybody, what justice means to everybody, and what self-esteem means to everybody. That's what this is saying. And that means you have to ask questions, but you also have to have your ears and your eyes and your nose open. Your staff has to be paying attention. Find out what the needs of those people are. Okay? Joe Namath at the Atrium Club. What Joe Namath liked to do was swim laps in a swimming pool, but he didn't want anybody else in the pool with him. So our lifeguards would monitor usage in the pool and know what times of the day the pool was empty. And they would make sure the membership person called Joe and said, the pools are empty from this time to this time on these days. And that's when Joe would show up to swim. We understood what safety was to him, justice and self-esteem. We went out of our way to make it happen. And what was it worth for us? It was worth a lot of money. He paid a lot to be a member. He brought a lot of members in. That's all that was important. Okay? I see another hand. So let's see if I'm better with the headset now. I know you can speak English too, but you can do it in Spanish because this will give me practice. What? Well, they could translate as well, so I'm sure the audience wants to hear your question. The young man needs a microphone.
Well, at what point do you, okay, I understand you're talking about making experience and going out of the way for certain customers, like you just said with your name. So at what point do you get your employees to distinguish what is acceptable as far as going out of the way, trying to do something extra for the normal client, as opposed to kind of maybe going overboard and making somebody feel too special, or the other person, the other customer or client might feel, hey, they're going overboard for this guy. You bend the rules for this guy a little bit, or marginally. Why not do this for me? So I mean, how do you get the employees to distinguish what's going overboard and what's within the realm of what's reasonable?
Okay. It's an excellent question. First, there's a couple of things here. First is remember, everybody is different. There's a saying that goes, I treat everybody equally by treating everybody differently. You got to sit and think about that for a second. Second is every club needs to have a box, which is a set of rules, club rules. They can be as broad or they can be as narrow, preferably as broad as they can be. Okay? So you have to have some limitations. But the point is, I treat everybody equally with justice by treating everybody differently. But remember, what's important to you is different than what's important to me. And all I want to know is, what did you do that I needed? What was important to my safety or my justice or my self-esteem? Okay? Versus maybe what was important to you. And that only comes from training with your staff, really working. There's a saying, and I know other people say it. Mr. Debman, who was the chairman of our company, said this. And he said, this is for every employee to know and understand. The member is always right. And by the way, when they're wrong, they're still right. Now, that's a value. And I was going to talk about values in a second. You got to instill that. People have to understand. I won't do something for someone if it's going to disrespect another member or disrespect an employee. If it becomes to a situation where the respect or integrity of an individual is sacrificed, then you don't do it. That's the rule. I mean, that's the rule we had in our company. Okay? I would do anything for a member, but if they disrespected one of my employees, I had members who hit my employees. They weren't members anymore. I'm sorry. I don't care how much money you spend in the club. You're not going to do that to my employee, whether they're a $5 an hour employee or a $100 an hour employee. You're not going to do that. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but maybe those two comments and then understanding that box sort of helps with that. It's really hard for people to get, but people who get it, their businesses are just absolutely incredible. So I'm going to skip. I'm not going to read over this page. What I put up here for you, and you can take a look at it, because I don't think you want to hear me read this. I want to go over some more fun stuff. This is an example of a fitness floor. And what I did is I put up on the side here needs that people have. Like saludo, to be greeted. But for different people, a greeting is a different thing. To some people, it's calling them by their last name. To other people, it's calling them by their first name. To other people, it's to smile and stand up and greet them. If I'm here, I have a hard time in Russia with this, and I have a hard time here. You sort of hug and you sort of cheek-to-cheek type thing. Us Americans, we came from pilgrims. We're conservative. If I hug another man, I'm accused of something. If I kiss a woman on the cheek, it's sexual harassment, okay? So it's really hard for me to adapt to that when I go to another country, okay? So he's laughing. He probably knows what I'm saying. The point being is, what's the right greeting? Everybody has a different way to be greeted. Can you discover that? That is not one person can do that. Your employees have to do it. And I talked about justice and what is entertainment and on a fitness floor. I guess the point I was going to show you is there's different examples. You have to find out in your club what it is. It's easier to go expectations than go need. Because then if you go needs, you got to get to know the people. Every one of them as best you can. Expectations, you just have to create a profile. It works. It's a little bit easier, but still not easy. Because then you got to do a lot of things to exceed it. So if you get the PowerPoint for Guillermo, I just wanted to point this was here because I don't think it's worth your time for me to read all over this. You can take a look at it. This is an example if I was in a group exercise studio. What would justice be? What would safety be? What would be the proper greeting? All those types of things. These are just examples. You do this and you work with your staff, you find out what is important to people. okay? And I don't want to read it now, but what I do want to do is go on to this, okay, which is called service recovery. I'd rather call it experience recovery, okay? What happens in our business every once in a while is we screw up. Our members never do, by the way. Our members never make a mistake, they never do anything wrong. But we as employees, unfortunately, fail to meet an expectation, fail to do something wrong. Well, there's research that shows that, you know, when you fall a little bit short, if you can respond quickly and promptly, 95% of the time you will turn a dissatisfied customer or an outraged customer into, that's 0 minutes left? 2? 2 more? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'll try to fix. I'll go into New York mode now. No, I won't do that, okay? It's a service recovery process that if you can respond properly, you can turn people around from outrage to delight. And so service recovery process requires a couple of things. First, it requires that it be as close to the front line, to the customer as possible, okay? It can't be if a member has a problem and goes to your front desk person says, wait a second, I have to talk to my department head. Department head comes over and says, well, you know, that's beyond my capability. Let me talk to the club manager. You have now just completely lost your ability to recover. It should be they go to the front desk and immediately the front desk is capable of handling it. At Club Corp, I gave every employee, and I had 120 clubs I was responsible for, every employee had the ability to respond to a service recovery issue and spend as much as $250 of my club's money to solve the problem. No questions asked. They had the freedom to spend that much. Nordstrom's gives their employees even more freedom than that. Chances are my employee never has to spend any of that. But sometimes they do. But they recover. And I go from having a dissatisfied, outraged member to having an incredibly excited, delighted member who then becomes a loyal fan. Okay? Now, because I have 2 minutes, I do want to show the steps to service recovery. And then I'm going to have to close because there's a more incredible speaker coming up after me. And he needs to have as much or more time than me because he's that good to listen to. Okay? These are the things I want you to remember about service recovery. The first thing is you have to do is listen. Listen with your ears, listen with your eyes. Understand what the person's feelings are. Okay? That's the first, and that implies that you're going to empower people, that every employee has to understand this process. They have to understand when someone comes to them with an issue, a concern, you, first and foremost, have to listen to everything they say, understand what they're saying. Second is you got to empathize. You have to explain them. You understand their feelings. Okay? You understand why they're angry. You understand why they're disappointed, whatever it is. The third thing you got to do is you got to apologize, both on your behalf, on behalf of your business. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. I'm sorry, that should never have happened, and it won't happen again. The fourth thing is you got to respond. You have to take action. Taking action isn't always solving the problem. Taking action is taking a step that either solves it or gets it closer to being solved. And importantly, communicating to whoever that customer member is what the action is that you're actually taking. One thing that a member wants to know is, what are you going to do to solve my problem? Okay? You got to do it. And then you got to follow up. You have to follow up. Okay? Now, because I'm short on time, and I am going to go a minute over, so I'm telling you that right now. So I apologize. There's a little story that emphasizes this. I have a friend, his name is Mike Saldivar. He grew up poor section of Mexico City. He became a manager at the biggest club for Club Corp. And he had what was called an open door policy. If you walked in his office, he had this great big foam hammer with a handle and a head on the hammer like this. Whenever a member came in with a concern, the first thing he did was hand them the hammer and said, please hit me on the head for being so stupid to make that mistake. And members would come, they'd get the hammer, I'd be sitting there watching this, I'd be in the office, and they'd hit him on the head, and all of a sudden he'd laugh, they'd start laughing. He'd already diffused the issue. They said, by the way, what is your real issue? And he always solved it. But he solved it using humor. He made fun out of it. That was the start of his listening process, was to add a little bit of humor to it. I would have never thought of doing something like that. So, the last thing that I'm putting up here, and I apologize here again, my service recovery for taking too long. This is my favorite topic. I could talk all day about customer service. And you probably wouldn't want to be here all day listening to it. You got to create a service culture. This goes to your question. How do I get people to do this? First and foremost, you've got to create service-driven values for your business. Do you have values in your business which every decision you make is based on? At Club Corp, we had a value that was the member and guest is king. Everything we did was based on making the member and guest king. At Reds, it's hello and goodbye. Every member, no matter where they are in the club, is going to get a hello and goodbye from every one of my employees. Okay? Those are values. Those are service-driven values. What are your values? I just finished rolling this out in Russia for one company. They've created their service values. Every employee has to know them, but more importantly, they have to breathe them. The second thing is that you got to walk the values from the top. It doesn't do any good in a service culture to have all these incredible values and the boss doesn't live, breathe, and die them. It's a problem with American Airlines. They preach values, and you'll never see the CEO flying coach. You'll never see him stand behind the desk. You got to live and breathe the values as a boss. Then you've got to establish systems in which you can deliver those values. You have to find a system, standards, a way in which you can make sure that those values are being lived and breathed all the time. That is part of creating service culture. The fifth one, I'm going to skip 4 because I think 5 is one of the most important ones. In a service culture, you've got to eliminate member sacrifices. You've got to find a way to eliminate the sacrifices your customer has to make to use your club. And think about sacrifice. Okay? I'm going to try to use an example. I go to the club. I have to hand the front desk my membership card. But by the way, my front desk person is talking on the phone on their iPhone with their best friend. So now I have to wait for them to get off the phone, take my card, and scan it. Okay, now I get in. Now I have to wait for someone to hand me a towel. The point I'm making is that I want to find ways to eliminate every sacrifice my member has to make when he uses my club. If he's sacrificing a minute at a time, can I reduce that minute? If he's sacrificing $1 he doesn't need to sacrifice, can I remove that? Go back and sit with your team, brainstorm, and think. Walk through the club as a member. What are you sacrificing that you wish you didn't have to sacrifice? You've got to learn how to eliminate those to create a service culture. Okay? So identify it. Okay? And then always in a service culture, create a service recovery process. Okay? So I'm going to conclude a little bit before I would like to, but I want to make a point. First thing we understand is what's important to our business is membership retention. Okay? Second is, to catch retention, you got to have member and customer delight. In order to do that, you got to create memorable experiences. To create memorable experiences, you got to deliver great customer service and sustain it. In order to do that, you have to understand how to exceed people's expectations or identify their needs and fulfill those needs. You got to have a service recovery process, and you've got to have a culture that lives and breathes service. I want to end late and thank you all for sitting extra time through my presentation. I greatly appreciate it. It's been a wonderful experience. You will have to listen to me one more time talking about the most exciting subject in the world, which is numbers, finance, tomorrow. But I appreciate it. I would hope if everybody went back to the club and just tried one thing to blow their members away, to knock their socks off, to make the raving fan, your business will be extremely successful. Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon, and enjoy Justin, who is your next speaker. Thank you.